This week, we're talking about how to keep your gray tank clean and make it smell better, and how to keep your black tank clean. It's not fun, it's a touchy subject, but it has to be talked about. So stay tuned, back in just a second. Hey Camping Nation, thanks for stopping by. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Tank Maintenance 101 this week. There's a lot more to it than just filling it and emptying it. There's quite a few things to it. And just like everything else, I learned this the hard way. Our first camping trip went without a hitch. Well, actually, there was a hitch. That's when we found out that the gray tank doesn't hold much water, and we did not have full hookups, nor did we have a portable tank. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night. I had to hook up to the Tahoe and drive out to the dump station, and there was no way to turn around right there. So I had to go out down the driveway, pull out onto the road, back up, and then pull in and come back down and back into my parking spot, into my campsite. That took about an hour and a half, all in all. I was also doing it by myself, no spotter, no nothing, just mirrors. I didn't even have expanded mirrors. I just had the stock regular mirrors. So I was doing it with just my mirrors, no spotter, and at nighttime as a newbie. Fun times. That's when I learned about the portable tank, which we talked about that the other day. I think it was 2 weeks later. We went to one of the state parks here in Ohio, Alum Creek, and we invited some friends. Another couple, they had a boat. We had the camper, they had the boat. Sounds like a good time. Until we opened up the camper and we all walked in, and it smelled like solid waste. It smelled bad. We were humiliated, not just embarrassed. We were well past embarrassed. We were like all the way past embarrassed and just humiliated. All I'd done was, before we left the first campsite, the first camp trip, I pulled up to the dump station on the way out of the park and dumped the tanks. And that was it. Empty the black, empty the gray, put the hose away, taillights and tire smoke. I'm back in Ohio and planning on another camping trip. I didn't know about having to rinse out the tanks. I didn't know about having to put any kind of chemicals in the tanks. I didn't know about keeping lots of water in the tanks. I was trying to use very little water when flushing so that the tank would not fill up as quickly. I did it all wrong. I think every bit of it I did wrong. I then found out how to get the tank cleaned out and how to keep it from getting like that. And those are things that we're going to go over. Since I don't think most of you have a brand new camper right now, untouched, we'll go ahead and start with how to prep your tanks to get ready. When we bought this second camper, the Sunset Trail, the one we have now, when we bought it, the front black tank was full of solids. This one has the sprayer inside to help knock out all the solids off the walls and rinse it all out, tank flush. But this one doesn't work properly. I think I've mentioned it, that it's on my fix-it list. As soon as you hook up the hose to it and turn on the water, you got water pouring out from underneath the camper. So there is a hose disconnected somewhere, or split. Either way, it should be a fairly easy fix. I just need to get in there and do it. Let's assume you just bought a camper like we did, and it has a filthy tank. If it doesn't have a sprayer or a tank flush, if it doesn't have one, or if it's broken like ours is, then you still have to work at it. You have to work harder now to get that tank cleaned out. My advice is, if you don't have a place to drain at home, then you need to go to a campground with full hookups. If you do it this way, you can take your time, do a little bit at a time, check your progress, and keep on working at it instead of spending 5 hours in one day in the backyard. When you're getting ready to leave out from the house to go to the campgrounds, fill up that gray tank halfway, maybe a little bit less, and just stand there with the garden hose aimed into the toilet. Stand there and hold the thing open and just spray it down there with as much velocity as you can, because there's a poop pyramid right underneath your toilet. And you can picture it. It's literally a black tank with a pyramid of human waste and toilet paper and maybe some bugs. Ew. You get your garden hose, you spray that sucker down. You can get a flashlight and look down in there and see when the mess is covered up. Once the entire mess is covered, you're good with water. Now you drive to the campgrounds. The further the better. And if it's all perfectly smooth sailing, then at the last couple of miles, you need to start jerking the wheel around and sloshing the tank. You want that water blasting around in the tank and hitting that pile. The longer that pile has been in there, the harder it's going to be. And the drier that pile has gotten, the harder it's going to be. So anyways, you're sloshing the water around, you're beating up that pyramid. And as soon as you get to the campgrounds, dump the tanks. Dump that black tank, flush all of that out, then get that garden hose and stand in there in the bathroom again and just spray it down. And you'll want to do this a few times through that weekend. You may not get it all the first time. It may take you a couple camping trips. But you just keep on going at it, and eventually you'll get it all out. You can get a wand, and basically it's just a plastic tube. We had one of these on our old campers, and I gave it to the new owners since we were getting a tank flush model and we were selling a non-tank flush model. And that does wonders for hosing down the walls on the tank and for cleaning off the sensors, because that will get toilet paper hung up on it. But if you've got a pile in the bottom of the tank, you're going to need water pressure or you're going to need water sloshing. That's just all there is to it. Now, once you get your tanks cleaned out, or you got a brand new camper, there's numerous different ways to treat your tanks. A lot of campgrounds will ask what kind of chemicals you use in your tanks. They don't want chemicals. They don't want Rid-X. They don't want any of those. I can't remember what's in the Rid-X, but it's got microorganisms or something that eats away messes in the water. They don't want that. And since this is not actually a septic tank, it's just a holding tank, you're not really supposed to use that stuff because you never get to use it properly. And it's kind of expensive to put that stuff in and just dump it out 2 days later, 3 days later, even a week later. So all you need to do is treat your tanks as a holding tank. You can get stuff called Happy Camper. You can get some kind of blue stuff that you add into the water. It's kind of like the porta potty stuff. It stains. If you get the blue stuff, be careful. It stains. Some people insist that if you just use lots and lots and lots of water, you don't need to put any chemicals in there. I guess if you use enough water, you can pull that off. But that's going to take a lot of water. I would say use some chemicals. Personally, I don't use any of those commercial available chemicals. I do a variation of the Geo method. The Geo method, if you were to look this up online, that's what everybody always says on these forums. They always say, Google Geo method and do that. The Geo method basically says use X amount of fabric softener and Dawn dish soap and dump it in your tank. It coats the tank and the sensors to where stuff doesn't stick to it. And then you put soap in the mix, and that's just, it's soap. It works. And, nothing's going to stick to it. Stuff won't stick as easily. You still have to properly flush the tank. Now, most people do a variation of the geo method, and they do their own version of it. Personally, I don't even measure how much of the borax I put in there. I get a box of borax, and it's cheap. If you get the borax brand, it's really cheap. And I usually just take the cardboard box and I empty it into a plastic container. And when it comes time to treat the tanks, I just dump some in until there's a little bit of a pyramid in the toilet, and then I flush it down, and then I might pour more in. It all depends on how much or how little I think I need on the tanks. I'm still cleaning that one front tank from the previous owners. I think it's almost clean. Almost. It doesn't stink anymore. That's the important part. Then I also put one, sometimes two Tide Pods down in there, and you just take them and just toss them down in the toilet. And dish soap. It doesn't have to be Dawn. I don't know if Dawn is any better than most of the others. I think that's everybody's go-to because it cleans up the ducts. Dish soap. And when it comes to the dish soap, same thing, I just go and just squeeze some down in there and flush it. Something else, never let your tanks go dry during the season. When you dump your tank, you'll then want to rinse it out with your tank flush. If you don't have a tank flush, you can dump 5 gallons of water in there, 3 of them, 15 gallons or so, and then dump that. Then flush it again or dump more water in it again and flush that. And you want to keep on doing this until the water is coming out. Doesn't have to be crystal clear, but you want it coming out clean. Definitely not brown. And of course you get a clear elbow on your hose. I think I mentioned that before on the must-have stuff. You'll want a clear elbow coming off of the camper before the hose. That way you can watch it and you know what's coming out. Once the water starts coming out clean, or cleanish at least, then you drain the gray tank. You use the water from the gray tank to rinse out the hose. Once you're done with all that, now it's time to treat your tank. Never let your tanks go dry, especially the black tank, at least not during the season. If you let the tank go dry, then you're right back to square one. If there's any solids, it's going to become really solid. I always put 5 gallons into the tank and then the geo method. I dump in all the stuff. The fabric softener, the soap, the Tide Pods. Some people use bleach sometimes. I'm not a fan of it, but it will knock out some smell. It's very corrosive. I can only assume that the tank monitors are metal. I don't know. But bleach would be very bad for that. Bleach is very bad for rubber seals. So I don't tend to use it. I've dumped it in there, but I don't like using it. But it works. It works wonders. And it is cost effective. The Happy Camper stuff, it's pretty pricey. The blue stuff, they gave us some when we bought our camper 2 years ago, the one we have now. And there was, I think, 9 little bottles. And they were like, little airline bottles, plastic. Now that we've got the black tank taken care of, we need to look at the gray tank. And the gray tank can become just as nasty as the black tank. Yes, it can, believe it or not. Especially if you full-time, and the more you cook inside your camper, and the more dishes you wash inside your camper, the more it can happen. Think about it, you get all kinds of solids when you wash your plates, washing your pots and pans. All the food that goes down into the tank just sits at the bottom of the tank. A lot of times, especially on a full hookup, people do not close their gray tank. I do it myself. I leave it open. That's not really good practice. You'll want some water to build up in there so you can flush all the debris out. So what I actually do is I'll go, hook up, leave the gray tank open. And then the night before we leave, I'll go out and I'll close the gray tank. Take a shower or two, do some dishes. We've got separate tanks, so I've got to make sure I get plenty of water in this tank, plenty of water in that tank. but I will go ahead and get everything all filled up, and that way when I go to rinse out the hose after the black tank, I can rinse it out and have all that volume push out the stuff in the bottom of the gray tank. The gray tank isn't as important to treat. Some people don't treat it at all. Others, they do the geo method. I don't think I've ever done the geo method. Your shower stall gets a lot of soap down in there, so you don't really need to add the soap. If you've got multiple gray tanks like we do, your kitchen sink, it puts down a lot of soap in the gray water too. That also has the debris, the food debris. So that's up to you. Sometimes, especially full-timers, people say that their gray tanks smell bad. I haven't had the problem yet. Now, lucky you, I'm an artist and I drew a diagram. I'm going to take a second here and ask you to click the like button, maybe even the subscribe button, and share it with your friends. Put the bell icon on. You really don't have to do that because we go up Monday afternoons, every Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. The other time zones don't exist. I'm a famous drawer person. I draw stuff and people remember it because it's so terrible. So anyways, that's supposed to be a toilet. And when I say a pyramid, I am talking about a solid waste pyramid, a poop pyramid. You will get layers and layers and layers and layers of both solid waste and toilet paper, because it just drops straight down from the toilet and lands right there. So it's all going to pile up if you don't have any water in it. Once you get some water in there and you start driving around sloshing it around, or you get the sprayer, or you bring in the green garden hose and you stand there spraying the water in. That is a hose in his hands. You spray it straight in, you spray it straight down onto that pile, and it starts to break it down. You did that much just with the sprayer. Now when you drive to the campgrounds, sloshing around, it's going to smack that, and that little bit right there, over time, will be gone. And it's just going to be washing along, floating along in the tank. So as soon as you get to your destination, you dump it. There's your gate valve, there's your discharge, this is the pipe. Again, famous drawer person. Over here, we have your gray tank. Your black tank, the only thing that goes to your black tank is the toilet, the commode, the water closet, whatever you want to call it. Your body waste receptacle. Yeah, that sounds good. Your gray tank has sinks. That's the kitchen sink. See, beautiful, isn't it? And then this is the shower stall. And you can tell by the way that it is to spraying down water hose. So both of these just empty into the tank. Now, like I said, you're doing your dishes in here. You're going to get bits of your pork and beans. You're going to get your bacon grease from the morning. Don't put grease down there if you can help it, but you're still going to get some grease when you're doing dishes. There's the hose. You're going to get the little bits. You empty this one first, like I was saying. So then all going straight down. This is saved up from the night before. And so you pull all down here. That green stuff right there, it comes out. It rinses out. So you'll want to fill up the tank. You put it away back in the night before we leave. I close that valve, and that way, whatever food waste is in the bottom, it doesn't solidify. Because even though it's not going to be something like that, it's still going to be solidified mess in your tank that is going to stink. So a gallon of water weighs a little over 8 pounds. Remember, everything is built by the lowest bidder. The straps that they use to hold up these tanks are garbage. As well get. The hardware they use is garbage, and they don't do drug tests on the assembly line. Now, something, the manufacturers don't say anything about this, but I recommend against traveling with a half tank of water. I think that's about it. I can't think of anything else needed for Tank Maintenance 101. Anything and everything can happen. So there's no point in adding excess weight. 5 gallons of water, okay, 40 pounds. That's okay. 10 gallons, that's 80 pounds. That's getting up there. 20 gallons. Tanks? What do you use? It's easy to do 20 gallons. And what's your starting to put a lot of weight in there. And you've still hardly put a dent in the capacity. So just put 5 gallons of water in there for traveling. That's enough to splash around. I've got a list of things that need done. The tank. That's enough to knock out some solids if you have them. Actually, I have 2 lists. Look at that. That's a whole lot of stuff. If I'm forgetting anything, go ahead and put it in the comments. Matter of fact, if you got questions about what I do or what I'm recommending you do, we have that to look forward to next week. Is happy. And until then, everybody loves to be a happy camper. So we'll see you at the campgrounds. Next week, I plan on having the camper here.